Thank you, Director Comey and Admiral Rogers. Director Comey, you've served time in a courtroom as a prosecutor, and I'm wondering if you remember the instruction that is read to juries every day that if you decide that a witness deliberately lied about something significant in this case, you should consider not believing anything that witness says.
Yep, that's familiar to me.
And your testimony at the beginning of this hearing was that President Trump's claims that former President Obama had wiretapped him is false.
I said we have no information that supports them.
Thank you. With respect to Donald Trump, do you remember the other instruction relating to truthfulness of a witness or a defendant? If a defendant makes a false or misleading statement relating to the charged crime, knowing the statement was false or intending to mislead, that conduct may also show he or she were aware of their guilt.
Yep, familiar to me from my distant past.
I want to talk about the Kremlin playbook. And there are a number of ways that a foreign adversary could seek to influence a person. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Financial?
Yes, that can be one.
Romance, you said, is another.
Yes.
Compromise?
Correct.
Setting up a compromise?
Sure, to execute on a compromise, yes.
How about inadvertently capturing a compromise? Meaning they have vast surveillance and you stumble into that surveillance and are caught in a compromise.
And then they take that information, try and use it to coerce you. Yeah,
Right.
that's part of the playbook.
Thank you to our ranking member, and thank you again to our director and Admiral Rogers. Director, would you agree that the FBI, when it's considering a counterintelligence investigation, views contacts between U.S. persons and, say, Russia differently than it would view contacts between U.S. persons and the U.K. or France or Germans?
Yes, very much so.
And that's because they're a foreign adversary.
Correct.
And so to land on Russia's radar is somebody that they may want to recruit. Would you agree that being a business person, a prominent business person, is something that would be attractive to them?
Could be. Might depend on what industry you were in.
Could also being a politician be something that would be attractive to them?
Sure.
And how about somebody who does business with Russians? Would that be attractive to them?
Could be. It would depend upon other things as well, though.
And we were starting to discuss this. Efforts to recruit include investing in a U.S. person. Is that correct?
Efforts by Russia to invest typically
Yes.
in their tradecraft, that can be one of the ways in which they cultivate a relationship, sure.
And if you are a U.S. person with a business, could it also include investing in your business or being a partner in some of your endeavors?
Lots of different ways someone could try and establish a relationship.
And going back to compromise, could we assume that any prominent U.S. person traveling to Russia would probably be covered by Russian surveillance?
Depending upon how you define prominent, but they have an extensive surveillance operation of foreign visitors. So no matter who you are, you ought to assume it, but whether that's true in reality is harder for me to answer. You want to answer that differently?
I agree.
And Russia is attempting to recruit and persuade individuals that we've discussed before, just as other foreign adversaries are, because they want to get something out of them. Is that right?
Correct.
And in many cases, it could be if that person is ever in a position of power that they could be in a position to influence policy in the United States.
To influence policy or supply them with information that's useful to them and maybe other purposes.
Now, with respect to your counterintelligence investigations, would it be important for you if you were concerned that a U.S. person had financial entanglements with a foreign adversary to see that person's tax returns?
Well, that's the hypothetical I really want to avoid answering, but the answer is it would depend, really. It would depend upon a whole lot of circumstances.
That would be one of the pieces of evidence that you would consider looking at.
Maybe, maybe. You might be able to get the picture you need from other financial records that are more readily available.
And you're aware, Director, that President Trump has refused, breaking with the tradition of the past 40 years, to show the American people his tax returns.
It's not something I want to comment on. I'm aware of it from the media.
Now, Russia also, in their efforts to recruit individuals and develop individuals, preying on or following someone's financial distress is also an avenue they may pursue. Is that right?
Potentially, if it offers an avenue for leverage on someone.
Right. And Director, would you consider 6 bankruptcies that an individual may have as being a point of leverage?
I can't say. I don't know.
And Director, you're aware that President Trump has had 6 prior bankruptcies.
It's not something I'm going to comment on.
And Director, when your agents are conducting a counterintelligence investigation with respect to a foreign adversary and their efforts to recruit or cooperate with a U.S. person, would you look at the U.S. person's travel to that country?
As part of evaluating whether there's an illicit relationship?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. And are you familiar that President Trump has traveled at least 3 times to Russia?
That's not something I'm going to comment on.
Okay. Are you aware that his son, Donald Trump Jr., has traveled at least 6 times to Russia?
Same answer.
Donald Trump has said a number of times that he has had nothing to do with Russia. And I want to ask you, Director, if you're familiar with Deutsche Bank and its $300 million loan to Donald Trump and his organization.
It's not something I'm going to comment on.
Director, are you aware that Deutsche Bank has been investigated and fined over $400 million by New York State for failing to stop the corrupt transfer of more than $10 billion out of Russia?
I think generally from press accounts.
So an individual's association with a bank that has had dealings with Russian money laundering, that would be something that would be a red flag for a counterintelligence investigation, I would assume.
That's a hypo I don't want to answer.
Director, would a U.S. business person who is associated with the foreign adversary having tenants in their office building that do business with that foreign adversary, would that be a red flag that a counterintelligence agent would look at?
Yeah, I can't answer that.
Are you aware that in Trump Tower were 2 tenants, Vadim Trincher and Anatoly Golubchik, who ran a high-stakes illegal gambling ring that was run out of Trump Tower?
Same answer.
And are you aware that the prosecutor in that case was U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara?
Same answer.
Are you aware, Director, that that U.S. Attorney was recently fired
Yes.
by the President of the United States?
Well, I don't know who fired him. I know from press accounts that he was asked to leave.
Director, are you aware of Felix Sater, a former Soviet official and advisor to the Trump Organization?
I'm not going to comment on that.
And Director, outside of Mr. Sater's relationship with the Trump Organization, are you aware that the FBI knew of Mr. Sater because of a $40 million stock fraud case that was prosecuted by the federal government?
Same answer.
Director, would a U.S. person having multiple trademarks in addition to the other relationships that I just described be a red flag for a counterintelligence investigation if those trademarks were in Russia?
Multiple trademark?
Yeah, registering trademarks in a foreign adversary's country.
I don't know what to make of that.
Okay. Were you aware that Donald Trump had 6 trademarks in Russia?
Not going to comment on that.
Were you aware that Donald Trump tried to market his Trump vodka brand in Russia?
Same answer.
Were you aware that Donald Trump ran Miss Universe 2013 out of Moscow?
Same answer.
Are you aware that Donald Trump Jr. said on a number of occasions that Russian money is pouring into the Trump Organization and that there is a disproportionate cross-section of the company's revenue coming from Russian money?
Same answer, Mr. Swalwell.
So hypothetically speaking, though, would a foreign adversary and its oligarchs having a disproportionate cross-section of a company's revenue coming from that country, would that be a red flag for a counterintelligence agent?
I'm trying to be helpful, but I'm not going to answer
I understand.
this kind of hypo.
Thank you, Director. Director, are you familiar with a 2004 home purchase by President Trump in Palm Beach County for about $40 million?
Not going to comment on that.
Are you familiar with a 2008 sale of that same property for a 129% increase at about $98 million?
Same answer.
Are you aware that the buyer in 2008 was a Russian businessman?
Same answer.
And under the earlier hypothetical, would a foreign adversary's oligarch purchasing a home in the United States for 129% more than the home was purchased 4 years before, would that be a tool that a foreign adversary would use to try and recruit, develop, or bring somebody onto their side?
Same answer as before.
You said that it's likely, or somebody should assume they're being surveilled when they were in Russia. Would you assume that Donald Trump was being surveilled in 2013 when he was in Moscow?
I'm not going to answer. I was trying to confine my answer to prominent people should assume, not students and all those people who might go there for a brief holiday. I don't think I'd ask them to assume that.
Right. Would it be safe to say that if Donald Trump was doing something he shouldn't have been doing while he was in Russia, the Russians probably saw it?
Same answer as before.
Would it be safe to assume that if a prominent person was doing something they shouldn't have been doing while they're in Russia, the Russians probably saw it?
Yeah, I would stick to what I said before about prominent people should assume.
Mr. Director, was Donald Trump under investigation during the campaign?
Same answer as before. I'm not going to answer that.
Is he under investigation now?
I'm not going to answer that. Please don't overinterpret what I've said. As the chair and ranking know, we have briefed them in great detail on the subjects of the investigation and what we're doing, but I'm not going to answer about anybody in this forum.
Director, from our perspective on the committee, the dots continued to connect President Trump, his team, people in his orbit, to Russia. And the questions that we have, it's quite simple. Are these merely 100 different coincidences, or is this a convergence where you're seeing deep personal, political, and financial ties meeting Russia's interference in our campaign? So I'm wondering, Director, with your extensive counterintelligence expertise and in view of the Russian intelligence campaign to influence the election in which Donald Trump was the candidate, do you consider these number of connections between well-connected Russians and Donald Trump, the Trump organization, the Trump family, and the Trump campaign to be a coincidence or a convergence?
I'm not going to answer, Mr. Swalwell.
From your perspective, Director, have you ever seen in the history of American politics, or at least since you've been alive, any political candidate have this many connections, personal, political, and financial, to a foreign adversary?
Same answer.
Mr. Director and Admiral Rogers, this past election, our country was attacked. We were attacked by Russia. It was electronic. It was nearly invisible. Thanks to the hard work of the men and women who serve in our intelligence community, we know that the attack came from Russia. It was ordered by Vladimir Putin. He sought to help Donald Trump and to take down Hillary Clinton. The most disturbing finding for me and my fellow committee members is that Russia intends to do this again. And I see this as an opportunity for everyone on this committee, Republicans and Democrats, to not look in the rearview window, but to look forward and do everything we can to make sure that our country never again allows a foreign adversary to attack us. Because I think, Director, you and Admiral Rogers would agree that it's not only Russia that is sharpening the knives to go back at us or to go at our allies, it's also other countries who have similar capabilities. And so I think the best thing we can do now is unite around this investigation, have also a parallel independent commission to make sure we get to the bottom of what happened, why we were so vulnerable, and to assure the American people we'll never let this happen again.